Peg can probably show up late.
We got another minute.
Where is it?
Okay, ready to go?
Mr. Martin?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Northampton County Council meeting of September 21st, 2017 to order. Please rise for a moment of silent prayer. Thank you, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Ms. Zembo, can we call the roll?
Mr. Bennell?
Here.
Mr. Kuzic?
Present.
Mr. Deep?
Here.
Mrs. Ferraro is absent. Mr. Geisinger?
Present.
Mr. Kraft?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Vaughn?
Here.
And Mr. Moore?
Here.
All present except for Mrs.
One absent this evening. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the September 7, 2017. Moved by Mr. Werner to approve by acclamation, seconded by Mr. Bennell. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Kraft abstains. Okay. Passes by a vote of 7-0 with one abstention. Next would be courtesy of the floor. I have two individuals signed up. First one, Mr. Jeff Fox. Mr. Fox, would you like to address council?
Yes. It's a good-looking bunch, of course. I'm trying to be millennial-like. All right. There's a couple things that I wanted to say this evening. The first one has to do with the Da Vinci Science Center. I just wanted on record that I attended one of the forums, and I have it on good authority from others that have been to other forums, that I do not believe that Lynn Erickson nor Da Vinci Science Center was forthcoming to the public about the project. And I asked Lynn specifically how much money had the Da Vinci Science Center asked Northampton County for, and she did not specifically answer the question. She did that in all four forums from what I have heard, but I witnessed that at the Banker Forum myself. I personally would be concerned. I sit on a couple of the committees of Slate Belt Rising, and the Slate Belt now is beginning to get its share of money that it's been, it's not forgotten any longer as the gateway to the north of Northampton County. And there's initiatives going on fostering the Slate Belt. And my concern is I don't want to see any of the money that is flowing into the Slate Belt or helping to fund the municipalities in this Slate Belt out of the money that comes from the hotel tax grant be given to Da Vinci Science Center, because I think we're all agreed, and we all know that I call it a pipe dream, but it's at least a very ambitious project, to say the least. And Mayor Panto can indeed sell ice to Eskimos. That's a proven fact. But anyway, that's my concern with Da Vinci, that, number one, they were not forthcoming to the public. I do want council to understand that the whole guise of these public quote-unquote forums was to get the public rah-rahed up about the Da Vinci Science Center and to put their name on a letter in support of the center, which was to be presented to county council. So that is their method. So any letter that they present to county council, the guys, I guess, would be, see how many people support the Da Vinci Science Center, look how many people signed the letter. It's a game because the pressure is on. There's pressure for Salpanta. There's pressure from Da Vinci Science Center to Lynn Erickson to get her done. And now they've hired an architectural firm to get her done, which increases the pressure. So, and they can't leverage any other greater funds until they leverage local funds. So, but I do not believe they were forthcoming, and I am concerned about the slate belt. So that's my take on that. A year ago, approximately a year ago, a little longer than a year ago, this council met at Steel Stacks, and everybody was, ooh, this is great, this is wonderful, we ought to do this on a more often, on a more regular basis. Then it never happened. I get it. You're comfortable here, everything's here, and I am just here to urge council to, from a poor man's point of view, one that tries to be as involved as can be, that I would like to be here more often than I can. There are times when, with only one car, it is not possible. It is not possible because I have to ration gas to get here. And it certainly would be much easier to come to a council meeting if it were local. And I would just encourage and urge council to meet and schedule around the county, at least maybe quarterly, north, south, east, west. And frankly, I'm here to kick you in the collective butts because I think council needs to get the ball rolling and set up some meetings and do it. Your part in the logistics of this would be quite small. The burden would fall on the staff. But I think council has a role in saying, and maybe setting the dates or whatever, and then we can make this happen. I encourage and urge council to do that because I think it would help make government more accessible to the people. It might get people more involved, and I think it's something that we cannot do just once and then say, "Oh, see, nobody came." It's something that has to be done on a regular basis, and I would encourage and urge council to do such a thing. Thank you.
Thank you. J. William Reynolds, Bethlehem.
Thank you. J. William Reynolds, 34 West Elizabeth Avenue, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I just want to follow up on what I said last time when I want to say thank you. I'll start by saying thank you just for serving. I understand, as I said last time, now is not an easy time to be in government. And I think that it's Democrat, Republican. I know you guys represent interests and we're equals. And, I will not stand up here and necessarily go through the reasons why I did last time that I think you should vote for Lerda, because I think all of you have had an opportunity to consider the facts. I want to say thank you to some of you that have reached out to me and Ms. Carner, who is here, and also I know some of you have reached out to the mayor as well with some questions, and hopefully you've been able to get some information that has made your decision a little bit clearer. And like I said, I think it's a great opportunity for the city of Bethlehem. I think it's a great opportunity for the county to show, once again, like what can happen when local government partnerships. I know that the services you guys provide and the decisions you make are oftentimes things that are thankless jobs. And I know that a lot of times people don't show up at these meetings necessarily to say what everything is going well and that these services are being provided well. But I think that it's a testament to this body that when you look at the county from the outside in this time of tumultuous government, that you guys are finding a way. We have 7 Democrats in city council, a Democratic mayor, a Democratic controller, and it's not quite the bipartisan nature that you guys need to have working forward. So I want to say thank you, and also obviously, as I said last time, thank you for your previous support for different projects in the city of Bethlehem, the things that we're probably most proud of these days as far as steel stacks and a lot of different things going on in the industrial park would not have been possible without the support of this county council, county executive, and previous county councils as well. So once again, as the discussion comes up, I'm here, Ms. Carner is here as well in case you have any questions. But like I said, I know how often this works, and you guys do your due diligence, and you walk in here and you have a pretty good idea. So I will not necessarily go through the speech I went last time, but the opportunity. But I just want to say thank you again for the consideration, and thank you. I'm sorry, and thank you to the county executive's office as well for their support. Thank you.
Great. That was all we had signed up this evening. Is there anyone else here that would like to address council under courtesy of the floor? Okay, there being none, we will move into The Controller's Report, is Mr. Barron here? He's not here this evening. County Executive's Report, Mr. Brown, would you like to address council this evening?
Good evening, Council. I just wanted to reiterate comments I made last time with the state budget still not being finalized and the state now having moved into a position of not paying certain bills. With that, we're, as Northampton County, we're well prepared to ride out the storm. We don't know how long it'll be, but financially we're in good shape to be able to take care of the programming that we're delivering to the constituents, regardless of the fact that the budget has not passed at the state level. We'll continue to monitor it and report back to council on a regular basis.
Just to follow up, are there any specific payments that we had expected that have not come?
There were some payment, I believe, specifically a reimbursement for some of the children and youth the quarterly payment that was delayed, I believe. With that, I couldn't be any more specific at that point. Next council meeting, I'll give you if there's anything significant that we're due. But it's just an ongoing issue that we encountered last time. So that's all I had this evening.
Anything for the executive? No? Well, thank you. All right. We'll move then into old business. First item is the public hearing on an ordinance entitled "An Ordinance Providing for an Amendment to the Northampton County Home Rule Charter, Article 3, County Executive, Section 304, Special Prohibition to provide for term limits for the Office of Executive of the County of Northampton, Easton, Pennsylvania." This ordinance was introduced by myself and Mr. Bennell at the September 7th meeting. Public hearing, debate, and possible vote are to be held this evening. So at this time, I would like to conduct the public hearing regarding the ordinance. Is there anyone here that would like to address it? Okay. Could you step up, please, Mr. Fox? We got.
I do just want to say that I believe this ordinance is unnecessary, and it's my understanding that agrees with council. But to address the issue, the study committee that has been discussed, I believe, will take care of the issue, and I believe that I shouldn't be discussed or determined until after such study is done. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the end of the public hearing. The Governance Committee met to discuss this proposed ordinance yesterday, and after significant discussion, the decision or the recommendation of the committee was to table this, and instead Mr. Werner and Mr. Phillips have indicated that next meeting they would like to introduce an ordinance for a government study to address this and any other issue that might come up. Would you like to comment on that? Anyone on the committee yesterday?
I'd like to ask a question.
Certainly.
If you didn't make it out of your committee, why are we discussing it tonight? It didn't come out of the committee with any kind of recommendation to come to council.
Right. Well, the recommendation from the committee was to table this.
So why is it here right now? Why are we talking about it right now if it was recommended by the committee not to even come here?
Right. Because if an ordinance has been advertised, we have to conduct a public hearing before we can table it or take any action. But the recommendation from the committee is to table, and the reason for that is because the committee recommends that we proceed with the government study ordinance that will be introduced at the next committee.
I'll make a motion to table it.
Okay.
I second.
We have a motion to table by Mr. Kraft, seconded, and Ms. Zembo, can we call the vote? Seconded by Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr.
Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Deeks?
Yes.
Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Mr. Valon?
No.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell? Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Yeah. There's 7 yeses and 1.
Tabled by a vote of 7-1. And then next meeting, we'll expect the ordinance from the for a proposed government study. And everyone should have received the information regarding the last time it was introduced, and I was inaccurate yesterday. It was 2004. I had indicated it was 2003. And the minutes provide for some very interesting reading.
Yeah, it does.
Mr. Werner?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. The members that were in attendance at yesterday's meeting, the government's, it would be fair to say that we were compelled to reconsider the actions under the Home Rule Charter because of Mr. O'Hara's input, which directed us at the beginning of the meeting, and I, for one, want to thank him for the nudge. That was appreciated. He did reference Judge Moran, which was interesting. He chaired the Government Study Commission 40 years ago, recounted the debate on citizen participation. And I think it's good to take a couple steps back and review what we do before we act on things. So, I thank Mr. O'Hara for his nudge, and the mechanisms for the voter should be in place. So.
Okay. All right, so we'll look for that introduction in a couple weeks. Okay. Next item is the public hearing on the ordinance entitled An Ordinance by Northampton County Council concurring with the City of Bethlehem and the Bethlehem Area School District and providing for property tax exemption for certain deteriorated property is defined in Ordinance 2017-13 of the City of Bethlehem pursuant to Act 76 of 1977 of the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as amended, 72 Public Statute 4722, and Act 42 of 1977 of the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as amended, 72 Public Statute subsection 4711-101, and agreeing with the amendment to Article 342 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Bethlehem entitled Local Economic Revitalization Tax Assistance Enterprise Development Area. This ordinance was introduced by Mr. Werner, Ms. Ferraro, and Mr. Kraft at the September 7th meeting, and the public hearing, debate, and possible vote are scheduled for this evening. Mr. Werner, did you want to read the
whereases?
Yes.
Are all
No,
17
the
pages?
therefore, after the therefore.
Now, therefore, whereas the public hearing, the City of Bethlehem having jurisdiction in and about the County of Northampton, its subordinate governmental units, and public and private agencies and individuals presented to the Northampton County their recommendations concerning the location of the boundaries of a deteriorated neighborhood in deteriorating areas. Therefore, be it ordained by the County Council of Northampton County. I'll read 3 points, okay? As used in the ordinance, deteriorated areas means the portion of the city which City Council has determined to be physically blighted in Resolution Number 2017-103, pursuant to Ordinance 2017-3 and Act 76 of 1977 of the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and as amended, 72 PS 4722, passed April 18, 2017, which amends Ordinance 2016-23 and Act 42 of the 1977 of the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This ordinance shall terminate on December 31st, 2022, with the deteriorated areas adopted on April 18th, 2017, pursuant to City of Bethlehem Resolution Number 2017-13 and City Ordinance 2017-103. No later than August 1st, 2022, the Mayor of the City of Bethlehem shall submit a written report to Northampton County Council, shall inform Northampton County Council as to how this ordinance has been administered, the effects of this ordinance on the community, and include any suggestions or recommendations for this ordinance reenactment, modification, or repeal.
Okay.
So moved, okay?
All right. So at this time, we'd like to conduct the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address this further this evening? Okay. There being none, the first item that we have are the DCED submitted a significant amendment with changes. So I think at this time, it's probably easy if I just make this motion and I'll read through the proposed amendment, and I believe everyone should have a copy of it with the changes highlighted. So the changes or the amendments to the ordinance are as follows. First, underneath the introductory paragraph, we've relocated the definitions to include, as used in this ordinance, the following words and phrases shall have meanings set forth below. Becomes accessible means immediately following issuance of the state and local occupancy permits. Deteriorated area means that portion of the city which Bethlehem City Council has determined to be physically blighted pursuant to Act 76 of 1977 of the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as amended, in Act 42 of 1977 of the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as amended. Number 3, deteriorated property means any industrial, commercial, or other business property owned by an individual, association, or corporation and located in a deteriorated area as provided by resolution of council, or any such property which has been subject of an order by the city requiring the unit to be vacated, condemned, or demolished by reason of noncompliance with laws, ordinances, or regulations. Buildings wherein at least 30% of the usable gross floor area is utilized for industrial, commercial, or business use shall, if otherwise qualified, be considered a deteriorated property within this article. 4, improvement means that the construction of new building structures, new additions, the existing structure, or substantial renovations to existing structures which result in an increase in assessed valuation of deteriorated property. Such improvements shall have the effect of rehabilitating a deteriorated property so that it becomes habitable or attains higher standards of safety, health, economic use, or amenity, or is brought into compliance with laws, ordinances, or regulations governing such standards. Ordinary upkeep and maintenance shall not be deemed an improvement. 5, local taxing authority means the City of Bethlehem, the Bethlehem Area School District, the County of Northampton, or any other governmental entity having the authority to levy real property taxes within the City of Bethlehem. 6, municipal governing body means Northampton County. 7, become accessible means immediately following issuance of state and local occupancy permits. And on page 3, we will strike those definitions after the now therefore be it ordained portion, and I will not read that again. Under item 2, we cross out and strike part 1. And let's see.
I think that was it. Oh, no, it's not.
On page 11, Article 4, exemption schedule. We would change sections 2 to sections 3A and B as set forth above. On page 14, item C, item number 1, we would strike out the 50% exemption as set forth in section 2. That becomes section 4. Likewise, in section or part 2, we strike 1 and replace that with a Roman numeral 4. Then we add Article 5, a notice to taxpayers. Part A, there shall be placed on the form application for building, zoning, and alteration permits the following. Notice to taxpayers, under the provisions of City Ordinance number 2959 as amended, you may be entitled to a property tax exemption on your contemplated new construction. An application for exemption may be secured from the City of Bethlehem and must be filed with the city at the time a building permit is secured. Item B, at the time a building permit is secured for construction upon an existing deteriorated property for which an exemption is requested, The taxpayer shall apply to the City of Bethlehem or any successor agency thereto for the exemption provided in this ordinance. The taxpayer shall be permitted to apply for the exemption provided in this ordinance up to a period of 60 days from the date a final executed building permit is secured. Request for the exemption must be in writing, verified in full as prescribed by the city, setting forth the following information. 1, the date a final executed building permit was issued for said improvement. 2, the type of improvement. 3, the summary of the plan of the improvement. 4, the cost of the improvement. 5, that the property has been inspected and verified by the City of Bethlehem Bureau of Inspections. 6, any or all such additional information the city may require. Then we add Section 6, procedures for obtaining exemptions. In the first paragraph, we strike Lehigh County Board of Assessment Appeals, and that becomes Northampton County Board of Assessment Appeals. On page 16, the Roman numeral 6 becomes Roman numeral 7. And in the termination clause, we strike no later than August 1st, 2022, and change that to December 31st, 2023. Later in the paragraph, after December 31st, we strike 2022 and replace that with 2023. And then at the end of the paragraph, we add, unless such property tax exemption is rescinded in accordance with the default provisions of this ordinance, even if this ordinance expires or is repealed. Then there's a strikeout of a double typographical of the same phrase. Then Article 7 is stricken to become Item 8 or Article 8 under Hearing Board. And after the County of Northampton in that paragraph, we strike the Director of Fiscal Affairs of Lehigh County. On page 17, 3 members shall be selected at large for their interest in accomplishing the objectives of this ordinance, shall serve until, and it has December 31, 2004, and that becomes 2023. The following sentences are added underneath. The hearing board shall have the following powers. Number 1, to hear appeals from any person aggrieved in the application of this ordinance. 2, to make rules with regard to conducting its hearings. 3, to make such findings of fact as may be required by the application of this ordinance. 4, to decide questions presented to the board. 5, to affirm, revoke, or modify the decision of the City of Bethlehem as to the eligibility of a particular property for the property tax abatement as provided for in this ordinance. 6, the board shall meet upon notice of the chairman within 30 days of the filing of an appeal and shall render its decision within 30 days after the appeal hearing. 7, every action of the board shall be by resolution and certified copies furnished to the appellant. 8, all hearings shall be public, and the appellant or any other person whose interests may be affected by the matter on appeal shall be given an opportunity to be heard. 9, for the purposes of this ordinance, every action of the board shall require a simple majority of the members in attendance. Attendance at the hearing by 3 members of the board shall be required to constitute a quorum for a meeting and for action on an appeal. Then we strike the Roman numeral 8, and it becomes Roman numeral 9 for the rules and regulations section at the bottom of page 17. Then we are creating a severability clause, and that is Article 10. Then we are adding a default clause, that is Article 11, which says tax abatement under this ordinance shall be available only for those properties for which real estate taxes are promptly paid and discharged when due. Any property that is declared delinquent as established by the the statutes of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania shall lose the LERTA benefits, and any and all currently due and future taxes shall be due and payable at the full unabated assessment and tax rate. Then we have an appeal of default, and that says properties that have been declared delinquent may appeal the rescission of the LERTA benefits by providing a written request to the hearing board, providing a basis for the appeal, and the justification of the waiver of the requirements of Section 10. Then Section 12, it was Section 10, but it's stricken to become Section 12, is the effective date. And we strike December 31, 2022, and that becomes December 31, 2023. Then Article 13 indicates that all ordinances and parts of ordinances inconsistent herewith be, and the same are hereby repealed. And now I need a second for the amendments. Did everybody get that?
I heard you.
All right. So we have an amendment and its second. Any debate on the amendment? I'll just say one thing on the amendment as I read through it. The one thing that I did like is that people who are not paying their property taxes lose the benefits. That's a good thing. So a vote on the
I have a question.
yeah,
I mean,
on the amendment.
this is a substantial change. Do we know why it came in so late? I mean, this is almost like a rewrite.
Right. Mr. Hurlinger, would you like to address? I can tell you, in my time, I haven't had such a large amendment to any ordinance.
DCED's responsibility is to support and help the municipalities of the county with economic and community development, and this process is something that the City of Bethlehem feels is important for it, and it has approved it, and the school district has approved it. So we received information from them relative to the ordinance and put the information in a format, sent it back. There were some changes to be made. So, and we had this reviewed by the solicitor to make sure that everything was on the up and up, and it was fine the way it was. However, the City of Bethlehem requested additional changes to it, and we've just been trying to get those changes in as quickly as we can. And finally, that's all the changes we had. So, again, we had it reviewed by our solicitor to make sure that it meets county requirements and the state code. It does. There's no other limitation. It's just that the city wanted additional information in there, and we thought, okay, that's what they want to have their ordinance read. It's mostly procedural. It's mostly information that'll be beneficial to the taxpayer and to those who are involved with the LERTA, and it doesn't change the nature of the LERTA, nor does it change the outcome or purpose. And DCED, therefore, has submitted it.
Any other questions?
No, I'm not happy that that we have this
could have done a better
substantial
job.
substantial change.
Yes, we could have done a better job in DCED, and we will.
And I understand. I understand that it hasn't. The parts that I understand about this have not changed.
Right.
I'm okay. I just have to say on record, I'm not happy that this substantial change came in this late.
Yeah. I'll just ask our solicitor. I guess the question is, did this substantially change the ordinance as it was introduced, in your opinion?
Well, I frankly think the purpose of the ordinance, as I read it, was to, if you will, redefine the area that would be subject to the benefits of the LERTA. The only questions I had, and I will tell you that I saw the changes earlier today, is, first of all, and I don't know whether you want to discuss this now or after the amendment is accepted, but among the definitions on the first page, number 1 becomes accessible means...
Accessible.
Yes, accessible, my apologies. That's the same as number 7, and I'm not sure why we need both.
If I may say something, I would really like your comment, because I'm on the cusp of voting no for this amendment.
Okay, and the other issue, I mean, it seems to me that 1 and 7 are identical.
Yeah, so we should strike 7.
And then the other part of it that I just think I should point out to you is, if you look at what used to be the definitions, which are now removed, there is no definition of deteriorated property. There's a definition for deteriorated area. And when deteriorated property, the new definition refers to any industrial, commercial, or other business property owned by an individual, association, or corporation. And I just want to point out something that we talked about a year or so ago, which is that the LRTA, which if you look in definition number A2, is Act 76, Act
42?
Act 76, which is 72 pertinent statutes, 4722. The LRTA applies only to industrial, commercial, or other business property. It does not apply to residential property. But one of the things that we looked into back in August of last year was the fact that the way this is interpreted in the municipalities in question, specifically in Bethlehem, it appeared that it was usable for residential properties, and I was asked at that point to write an opinion about that. I did, and pointed out that LRTA only applies to industrial, commercial, or other business property, but there's another statute known as the Improvement of Deteriorating Real Property or Areas Tax Exemption Act, which does authorize improvements to residential properties. And both of those are referenced in paragraph A2. It refers to both the Act 76 and Act 42. Yeah. Act 42 is the one that I just referred to. I guess I'm just pointing out to you that A12 includes both of these things, LRTA and the other one that permits improvements to residential property, but the definition in A3, which didn't appear among the definitions that we removed on page 3, that refers only to industrial, commercial, or other business property, does not refer to residential property. I don't know that that matters, but I just think it's something that you should know before acting on it.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion for this amendment and a second, and I believe that we could amend the amendment if we wanted to. Clearly, the inclusion of 7 should be stricken. So do we have a motion to strike item 7? Because it's really just a double redundant.
Yeah, it's
Okay. Moved by Mr. Kraft, seconded by Mr. Bennell. So we have a motion and a second to amend the amendment to strike item 7. Let's call for the vote on that.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Dietz?
Yes.
Mrs. Ferraro?
Absent.
Sorry. Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
No.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
And Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 7 to 1.
Okay, so that's stricken by a vote of 7 to 1. Are there any other,
Scrivener errors?
I mean, that one is just easy to do. Is there anything else that can be, or that anyone believes to be necessary to amend in order to vote on the
I still have
Mr.
a
Phillips?
question.
Yeah.
I tripped over the same thing Phil tripped over. Is this for, this covers Act 76 and 42? So this is for both commercial and industrial and other business property and residential property?
Just like Easton.
That's the way I would read A2,
But A3 doesn't say that.
but A3 does not include residential
And
property.
I don't understand that.
Phil, if it's mentioned in number 2 and it's silent in number 3, doesn't number 2 hold weight if somebody wants to say it's wrong or an error?
Well, they define different things, Ken. The deteriorated area defines what portion of the city is deemed to be in need of
Right.
these areas. 3 defines properties which can be the subject of the tax exemption. And for some reason, and I'm not saying it's wrong, I just think you ought to know that that definition does not include residential property.
So are you saying we should amend number 3 to include the word residential in those industrial, commercial, residential, or other business properties?
Did we do that?
Is that what you're trying to say, to make it right so we
I'm
can
not-
move along here?
Yeah.
How confident are you in that decision?
Which decision are we talking about?
That adding that
Adding
would
residential.
would not further affect any other lines in this ordinance?
I mean, that's the intent of the entire alert is to fix this part of the city that has commercial properties, residential properties, and, industrial properties in it. So,
In answer to Hayden's question, the way I read this ordinance as primarily redefining the area and also setting forth again what the purpose of the legislation is. So, if you included residential properties,
3.
I think that would resolve the issue that I see as being overlooked. I think
Okay,
it's
so-
just...
All right, so I'll amend the amendment of the amendment.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion by Mr. Kraft, seconded by Mr. Werner. The motion is to add the word residential after industrial, and then a comma.
Residential, commercial.
So
or-
industrial, residential, commercial, or other. It's just easier to write it that way because there's space on the right-hand side of the paper. So industrial, residential, commercial, or other business property owned by an individual, association, or corporation. So that, we have a motion by Mr. Kraft and seconded by Mr. Werner, correct? To add the word residential to Article 1, Paragraph 3. Any discussion on that? Mr.
I have a question
Phillips?
for Phil. Phil, you said that this, to your knowledge, is redefining alerta area. Well, this is not redefining, this is defining. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but this is new.
I honestly don't know. I mean, there is an existing LERTA. I don't know,
That's
I
on the
don't
south
know
side.
whether...
This is a different
Different
alert.
area.
Well,
Yeah,
okay.
same thing. Here's a question,
Go
if I
ahead.
may, okay? Is this the same region? It's a different region, but it's the same program?
Boundaries. The boundaries have not changed.
Boundaries have not changed, correct?
I don't know.
No. Elisa says no. She's shaking her head.
Can I answer what I think it is? This is a new ordinance to establish a new alerta. We understand the boundaries. I certainly do. I don't have any complications in my head what the boundaries are. And this document has not changed the boundaries from what they were trying to establish. So it's a new LERTA. It's a new LERTA district. That LERTA district, that new LERTA district was described in this ordinance that was put before us and went through
public hearing, but it's new. It's not something that has been done on the south side that is being expanded toward the north side.
If that's a question,
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
No, it's not. I'm confident that that's a statement.
Do we have a vote on the adding the word here, or are we having a discussion
Yeah,
about something else?
That was on the, we have to have a
Motion and a
discussion
second.
on the adding the word.
This is still the discussion.
The
about
discussion
adding the
is on
word?
adding the word residential to paragraph.
Right, it sounds like we're talking about the word in the area and it's new or if it's old or anything. We're talking about a
Yeah,
word and
the
an amendment
specific
to the ordinance.
question is, do we add the word residential, and is there any further discussion about
On
adding
that particular
word?
issue.
Correct, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. I mean,
I'll
let's
just say one
just-
thing. This discussion that applies here could have ramifications throughout this whole document, and that's why this discussion I think that we're having here is germane. I know we're just changing that, but I'm just really concerned that that may change something else to our understanding within the document.
Yeah, and I'll just point out that if you look at in the whereas paragraphs on page 2, it does mention to provide for tax exemption for certain deteriorated residential property.
Yeah, it says it
So
there.
if you look within the whereas clauses, there is consideration there for residential property. I'm speculating, but I'm guessing that they perhaps missed
You putting that word.
putting that word in when it was drafted.
And these changes were done by our community and economic development people? No?
No.
Okay.
Well, I still stick by
Any-
that
Anything
motion.
further on adding
One-
residential?
One
Mr.
one
Geisinger?
comment, thank you, Mr. President. If the word residential, I believe that because it says deteriorated property means any industrial residential, and we add that up top, in the bottom of that same section, buildings here wherein at least 30% of the usable gross floor area is utilized for industrial, commercial, I believe the word residential would have to be
Okay.
added in that part of the
So we'll
paragraph
add it
as
there
well.
after industrial as well. Okay, will you amend your motion to
Yes.
include residential there?
In
Yes.
both places.
In both
Okay.
places.
So the motion is amended. It's to add the word residential after industrial at the first line in paragraph 3, and then the third to last line after
paragraph.
industrial on page 2. Okay, I think we got it now. Any further discussion on that? Okay, Ms. Zembo, on adding the word residential, let's call the vote.
Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
Mr. Warner.
Yes.
Mr. Dees.
Yes.
Mr. Geisinger.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
No.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Bennell.
Yes.
And Mr. Kuzic.
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 7 to 1.
Okay, so now, are there any other discussion or changes to the amendment? We're still talking about the amendment here. No further discussion on the amendment. Okay, so this vote is on the amendment to the ordinance that has been introduced. Ms. Zembo, can we call the vote?
1 second. We're voting on the.
We're voting
amended-
on the
As amended.
amendment as amended.
the
Yes.
amendment that-
The amendment as amended. We've made 2 amendments to the amendment. We added the residential and we struck the double sentence.
Who's on first?
Okay, so we have a motion on that? First and
We had a first and a second on the amendment.
just
That
got
was,
sidetracked.
who, was it
I'll make the
Mr.
motion and-
Kraft and
Yes,
Mr.
second.
Werner
There we
had on the amendment? I believe there had already been a motion for that, but,
Not on the amending, not on the motion to amend the amendments. I was looking for
oh,
the-
okay.
the ones
So we
that-
have those. All right. So this is now on the amendment as amended.
Okay. Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
Mr. Warner.
Yes.
Mr. Geisinger.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
No.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes.
Mr. Bennell.
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic.
Yes.
And Mr. Dees.
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 7 to 1.
Okay, so now we are voting on the ordinance as amended. Any further discussion regarding the ordinance now as amended?
I have.
Sure, Mr. Bennell.
I had reached out to Mr. Lauer, and I know when I first got on council, I had asked Mr. Lauer to look into somehow if we could cap taxes for seniors. And for 2 years, we went back and forth, and it was, you cannot target a specific group. And I'm in favor of this. I just want to clarify that. I think this is a fantastic idea. Growing up in Phillipsburg, I think this is something that should have been done over there to help it out. So I just want to say I am in favor. I just have a question of going back to if we couldn't come up with a way to legally get around capping taxes for seniors, how is it that specific areas and property owners can be exempted from taxes, but yet, and that's okay, but not a specific group of seniors?
Yeah, and I think I can answer your question. Pursuant to Act 76 of 1977 and Act 42 of 1977, that's the enabling legislation that allows us to do this.
And, and in writing the opinion that you asked me about previously, which I'm sorry I don't have with me, that had to do with whether you could make taxing decisions based on things like age or other types of differences between taxpayers. And the answer was that taxpayers had to be treated in the same condition, had to be treated in the same way. What we have had here is the intercession of the legislature, which has adopted these two statutes, which specifically say that you can have tax exemptions under these circumstances. So I think the answer is legally, yes, you can. And I've just actually expanded briefly on what your president said.
Anything else on the ordinance as amended? All right, well, I want to make a couple things. First of all, I think the goal here from the city is admirable. I just don't think that this is the right way to go about it. I think, I looked at what we've done previously in Easton, and there was limited success when we put alerta there. Secondly, what concerns me is this 10-50-50 split. I think maybe if the city had gone in at the same percentages as the school district and the county, I'd be more supportive. And then finally, I believe that this covers over 1,800 parcels. And, I feel that this could have been more targeted. And I think Mr. Dietz raised the issue of choosing winners and losers. If I lived across the street, I wouldn't be happy that my neighbor could fix their house and benefit in a way that I couldn't. So my suggestion would have been this. I think you can attack this program with CDBG grants, facade grants. We have an affordable housing fund. Earlier this year, I brought up the ability to raise a blight funding through a fee at the Register of Deeds office, but nobody was interested in that. And finally, the 800-pound gorilla here is properties have not been reassessed in this county in a quarter century. What needs to happen is these older neighborhoods should be reassessed, and the properties, assuming they are reassessed lower, the property owners would benefit. So I think that really needs to happen, not a tax gimmick. I think the real answer here is in the form of reassessment, and that will take political will sometime in the future to achieve. And that's my 10 cents. Any further, Mr. Dietz?
Yeah, I just want to thank them for coming up, actually driving up the Wind Gap and meeting with me and going over with this. And I really do feel a lot of the same things that you said, the selected targeted area. I do appreciate their goal for the area, and I don't want that to slate any future requests for grants or different programs and going for blight for it, but I do will be voting against it. So.
Yeah, I don't think this is the answer. I understand we need to help that. I sat on the SIP panel for allocating monies. There was a title that said LERTA, or North Side LERTA or something. So when I looked at that, I was really curious in regards to, is this money to support this program? But it wasn't. It was just to support that geographic district. And it was for planning, and I enthusiastically got on board on that. So I do think it needs to be worked on. I don't like the idea of picking winners and losers. This is not, don't think it's been that beneficial in Easton. I do think that, and I'm not holding that against this piece of legislation, but just for an editorial, that the school property tax elimination, Senate Bill 76, would be the answer. Would take out of this out of our hands. But that's not the subject here. But I won't be voting for this.
Mr. Kraft?
You know, we're muddying this up like we always do here traditionally. This LRTA is not going to have anybody across the street who's all upset because somebody else is improving their property. The area they're talking about, I don't know if any of you guys have ever been through it or even driven through it or know what they're proposing here, but it's not, you know, it needs help. We've done LRTAs all over this county. We did one for Easton, and the reason why that residential came up was because you and I were talking about Easton, not Bethlehem at the time. And I asked that question because of the way it was written. I don't understand the amount of revenue that we're getting or not getting by having this LRTA. Our taxing structure is the same, whatever their tax that we get, okay? It's not changing. They improve the house. When they improve the house, they're going to reassess the home. You talked about reassessments haven't been done because no one has the political willpower. Well, when you buy a new home, it gets reassessed. When you improve a house, it gets reassessed. There's your reassessment problem as they're happening. As far as Bethlehem and the amount of properties, you know, I don't know if you've been there, but Bethlehem's a little big, a lot bigger than Easton. And I think Bethlehem's going to have a pretty good, people are going to pick up on this and actually hopefully use it more than they did in Easton because Bethlehem's going to be proactive and in front of it and trying to get this area done. And I think everybody should vote for this because the people who have the most in the game is Bethlehem Area School District and the City of Bethlehem. Our insignificant amount of taxes that we may not see, and if we do nothing, that tax base is going to go down because those properties are going to continue to go the other way. And without any kind of help, you know, you talk about picking winners and losers and all that nonsense you wrote about. That doesn't apply, okay? We're not picking winners and losers. We're trying to take an area and get it out of blight and bring it back into where people want to live there and residents want to live there and bring more people in there paying taxes instead of school students, you know, when they cut it up into 4 and 6 buildings. So I don't know what's going on here. Again, this whole body here is amazing to me. Something as simple as a LRTA we can talk for an hour about and get nowhere. But I implore everybody to vote yes. There's no real reason to vote no on this besides some, I don't know what it is. But, again, that's it. Just 100% support this.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yeah, I'd just like to share my story about this particular area. I actually bought my first home in this particular LRTA district, and I can attest to what Mr. Kraft is saying. You know, you can see over the years it's slowly and steadily deteriorated, and as more people move out, more renters are moving in, and there's a lot less attention to detail, especially with the houses. I particularly, when I bought my house, I fixed it up, and I could see a couple of my neighbors putting out flowers, fixing their houses up. It's like, it's kind of contagious in a sense, because if people feel comfortable in their neighborhoods and they see that their neighbors are improving their houses, it gives them somewhat of an incentive to do the same. And I think this kind of pushes that needle a little bit farther. This area does need help. It does, and I'm fully supportive of this.
All right, Mr. Bennell?
I just like I touched on before, where my first house was in Phillipsburg, and it was in a not so nice neighborhood, and I was the one of the few who put money into the house, and of course the town just constantly nickels and dimes you for permits. There was no incentive, and the problem is, like the old adage goes, a blighted neighborhood starts with the first broken window, and you can let it go and not do anything and hope it gets better, or you could try programs like this to improve it. I commend the City of Bethlehem and the school district for doing this program. I think the onus falls on their shoulders to make sure that it's implemented correctly, and it gets taken care of. I think it's a good idea, and like I said, I think there should be more areas. I mean, there's a lot more areas in our county that could probably benefit from a program like this, again, as long as it's implemented correctly, so I'm in support of it.
Mr. Warner?
I'm going to vote yes and support this, not just because Ken's always talking about Bethlehem and comparing Easton, but because, first of all, the SIP programs are the backbone for these kinds of programs, and they're also, as for our small communities that come in and those that need the help, they come to us for this. These are the kind of programs that we need to help these communities that don't have any other way of helping themselves. I think it's a good move. Easton's maybe not as successful as it could have been, but it was a starting point, and it has driven other things in different directions to help. And I will be supporting this. And I know the neighborhood. I've driven by the neighborhood, was involved in it. And yes, I would be more than pleased to see the redevelopment and the revision of those homes in that area.
Any other comments? Mr. Phillips?
Bob, SIP really doesn't have anything to do with this.
It has supported the North Side programs.
Well, we had approved the SIP. Well, it's not been approved by the board, but me and you've already approved the SIP for the LERTA. So that's separate.
But it's separate, but it also is part of what goes on.
Okay. Anything else? All right, Ms. Zembo, can we call the vote on the ordinance as amended?
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
No.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
No.
Mr. Dees?
No.
Passes by a vote of 5 to 3.
Passes by a vote of 5 to 3. That was all we had under old business. Is there any other old business that any member would like to bring up at this time? Mr. Warner?
Just a report back to the council. September 6th, we had a discussion with Mr. Kevin Dolan on children and youth, and we sent a letter out. Mr. Phillips and I had co-authored a letter sent to the governors and some legislators, and we received and met with, I was out in Harrisburg and met with our Auditor General, Deep Pasquale, and we had questions and a wish list, and the Auditor General responded, and you should all know that he responded positively with an 80-page report that came out in the paper, and also a direct response to Kevin in Northampton County stating that at least 2 out of the 3 requests, okay, one having to do with the paperwork concerns, the second one having to do with the requirements for the civil service programs, and last but not least, the 20 hours for the kinship home program, which we're looking into right now. That is already being looked into, and so if I know there's no one here, Kevin's not here, there's no one except Kathy's here to hear about it, but the fact is that I will send the messages and information back to Kevin that this is being acted upon, and his problems are being reviewed.
Yeah, I read about the audit. It was spot on.
Yep.
I couldn't help but thinking about that meeting we had here with Kevin Dolan. So, good to see. Any other old business? Okay, we'll move now into new business. First item is the consideration of a Graysdale donation resolution, and I'll call on Mr. Vaughn to introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Whereas Northampton County Home Rule Charter, Section 20210 provides that County Council shall have, among others, the following powers, end quote, to accept on behalf of the county any gifts of real property and to provide for the acceptance of any agency on behalf of the county of other gifts, end quote, and whereas Environmental Strategies and Applications Incorporated is donating $600 to help fund an active Eagle Scout project at Graysdale, which is being worked on by local student Peter Gladstone of Troop 44. Now therefore be it resolved by the Northampton County Council that it does hereby accept the donation of $600 on behalf of the Eagle Scout project at Graysdale.
Okay, this was discussed yesterday at the Finance Committee, and there was a recommendation for approval. Any further discussion? There being none, Ms. Zembo, can we call the vote?
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
And Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8 to 0.
Passes by a vote of 8 to 0. Next item under new business is consideration of parks and open space projects resolution. First item is the Delaware and Lehigh Trail Dry Run Bridge project, and I'll call on Mr. Dietz to introduce that resolution.
Sure. Now, therefore, it be resolved by Northampton County Council supports, 1, the funding for the construction of the Dry Run Bridge along the DNL Trail within the borough of Northampton not to exceed $130,000. 2, the use of Act 13 Marcellus Sale Legacy Fund for construction of the Dry Run Bridge project.
Okay. This was discussed earlier at the Open Space Committee meeting, and there was a recommendation for approval. Is there any further discussion? There being none, Ms. Zembo, can we call the vote?
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
And Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8 to 0.
Passes unanimously by a vote of 8 to 0. Next item is the Walnut Port Trail Town Signage Project, and I'll call on Mr. Dietz to introduce that resolution.
Now, therefore, be resolved by Northampton County supports, 1, the funding of $2,000 for the construction of the Northern Lehigh Trail Town Walnut Port Trailhead project along the DNL Trail within the borough of Walnut Port to the Northern Lehigh Recreation Authority. 2, to use livable landscapes funding for the improvements needed at the Walnut Port Trailhead.
And again, this was discussed earlier at the Open Space Committee, and there was a recommendation for approval. Any further discussion? There being none, Ms. Zembo, can we call the vote?
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
And Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8 to 0.
Passes unanimously by a vote of 8 to 0. Next item is consideration of Parks and Open Space project amending resolution number 55-2015, and I'll call on Mr. Dietz to introduce that resolution.
Sure. I'll start with the last whereas, which is the County of Northampton Matching Grant Fund of originally $200,000 has changed to $72,667.03, will be taken out of Act 3 Marcellus Sale Legacy Fund, which the county has already incorporated into the 2015 budget. Now, therefore, be hereby resolved that the Northampton County Council supports the use of Act 13 Marcellus Sale Legacy Fund for the borough of Northampton to complete this project.
Okay. Again, this was also discussed at the Open Space Committee, and there was a recommendation for approval. I just want to add one thing. I mean, this money is available because the borough of Northampton came in well under budget on a previous project, so bravo to them. It's not too often that we see that.
Yes. So the municipalities on those grants are allowed to use in-kind labor costs. For when they use their own equipment and labor, they chose not to do it and return that fund. And actually, so somewhat to clarify, the funding that we received, basically $130,000 for that, is basically what funded Project A that we approved here in the same column. So.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Kudos to the township manager and all of the public works employees up there. Ms. Zembo, can we call the vote?
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8 to 0.
Passes unanimously by a vote of 8 to 0. Next item under new business, consideration of Article 13 resolutions. First one is the Aris Engineering Group, and I'll call on Mr. Geisinger to introduce that resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Whereas on August 25, 2017, Northampton County Council received a request from the County Executive for Council to adopt a resolution approving a 60-day contract in the amount of $27,000 with Aris Engineering Group Limited for a short-circuit study, protective device coordination study, and an arc flash analysis for the courthouse electrical system. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Northampton County Council does hereby concur with the recommendation of the County Executive has set forth in the attached documentation to approve a contract with Aris Engineering Group Limited for the short-circuit study, protective device coordination study, and arc flash analysis for the courthouse electrical system, and we so move. This was discussed yesterday as indicated at the Finance Committee, and it was our recommendation unanimously to move it forward for approval.
Any further discussion on the Aris engineering contract? There being none, Ms. Zembo, can we call the vote?
Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Dees?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
And Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8 to 0.
Passes unanimously by a vote of 8 to 0. Next item, consideration of Article 13 Contract Resolution, BSI Corporate Benefits. And I'll call on Mr. Geisinger to introduce that resolution.
Mr. President, whereas on September 13, 2017, Northampton County Council received a request from the county executive for council to adopt a resolution approving a contract at an estimated cost of $78,015.60 per year for a 3-year total of $234,046.80 with BSI Corporate Benefits for brokerage services for health and ancillary benefits for a term of 3 years. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Northampton County Council does hereby concur with the recommendation of the county executive as set forth in the attached documentation to approve a contract with BSI Corporate Benefits for brokerage services for health and ancillary benefits. And we so move. We, again, discussed this at length yesterday. There was a presentation by the Ms. Trapp, the HR director, explaining the need for a broker, which we do not currently have, and the possible benefits that could be gained by having a broker engaged on our behalf. And she was very adamant that she felt that by engaging a broker, we could have substantial savings far in excess of the contract cost.
Any further discussion on this item? Okay, there being none, Ms. Zembo, can we call the vote?
Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Mr. Bennell?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Dees?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8 to 0.
Passes unanimously by a vote of 8 to 0. Next item is consideration of Article 13 Contract Resolution, General Construction, Weiss Construction, Electrical Construction, Shannon A. Smith Incorporated, Plumbing Construction, KC Mechanical Services Incorporated, HVAC, KC Mechanical Services Incorporated. This is for the Louise Moore Park Homestead renovation project. And I'll call on Mr. Geisinger to introduce the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Whereas on September 15, 2017, the Northampton County Council received a request from the county executive for council to adopt a resolution approving a 1-year contract with Weiss Construction for the general construction in an amount of $549,128, Shannon A. Smith Incorporated for electrical construction in the amount of $194,650, KC Mechanical Services Incorporated for plumbing construction in the amount of $64,000, and a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning contract in the amount of $191,000 for a grand total of $998,778. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Northampton County Council does hereby concur with the recommendation of the county executive as set forth in the attached documentation to approve a contract with Weiss Construction, Shannon A. Smith Incorporated, and KC Mechanical Services, Inc.
Again, this was discussed at the Finance Committee yesterday, and the recommendation was to move forward. Any further discussion on this project? I'll just say I hope there's no change orders.
No, we said we weren't going to take in any more old buildings.
That's right. That's right. No more old buildings.
Our thinking was.
And I'm glad that silo thing is gone, too.
So this is for the second floor and the handicap accessibility and everything?
This is everything.
Yes.
Everything.
This is everything.
This
The
is
Weiss
everything.
Construction was the
Even
low
the parking lot,
GC.
even the handicap parking lot.
He's the general construction, he's the general contractor? And then he took all the other ones as subs, or are they all primes? Everyone's a sub under Weiss Construction? Prevailing wage forms, huh? Certified payrolls, okay.
Any other questions?
Watch him like a hawk.
Concerns? All right, Ms. Zembo, can we call the vote?
Mr. Geisinger?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzic?
Yes.
Mr. Dees?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
No.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
And Mr. Bennell?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 7 to 1.
Passes by a vote of 7 to 1. That was all we had this evening under new business. Is there any other new business that anyone would like to discuss? Okay, then we will move into council committee reports. Any committee reports? I'll just point out, and we discussed this earlier, yesterday the Governance Committee met, and we should have all received information regarding the minutes and the ordinance that was proposed and failed in 2004. And Mr. Werner and Mr. Phillips have indicated that they will be working with the solicitor and Ms. Zembo to bring that present so it could be introduced at our next meeting. Okay. Any other committee reports? No. Liaison reports? Any liaison? Mr. Vaughn?
Yes, I had the opportunity to attend the LVEDC meeting on Tuesday. There we learned, well, we actually, as a committee, adopted the strategic plan. I have the plan here if anybody's interested in reading it. Also, private investment report is actually way above normal, which is good for the committee. They're also prospecting many new potential donors. I have that list here if anybody's interested. And that was pretty much it. The only concerning thing was the state budget. Some of the grant programs that are given out could potentially be cut off if the state budget is actually adopted as it is, and which would actually paralyze the LVEDC.
Yeah, we discussed that earlier this evening at the Open Space Committee. If one of the proposed amendments goes through, it will have a significant impact on some of the open space and trail grants. I'll just mention that the Retirement Board met last week, and we approved our advisor transition from Marquette Associates to PFM, and seems to be going smoothly. Any other liaison? Okay, Council Clerk? No report. Council Solicitor? No further report. Anything else for the good of the order this evening? So we have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Bennell, seconded by Mr. Kraft. Meeting adjourned. Have a nice evening, everyone.